Hey everyone, it's Lexie. So in today's video, I'll be sharing with you all the books that I ended up reading in the month of January. So as you can tell, I'm in a very different location from where I usually film. I'm currently living in Montreal, and I'll be living here until mid-March or so while I'm currently working on my postdoc. So despite it being a very hectic month and me not reading for like a solid 2 weeks and amongst all the travel, like I still managed to get 3 books read, and 2 of them were pretty chunky, so I'm very proud about that. So despite this being a very hectic month with like traveling and going to the mountains and snowshoeing down a mountain, all these other things, I still managed to read even though I took like 2 weeks off of reading, so I'm very proud about that. And they're kind of all over in terms of genre, so without further ado, let's get started. Starting up, I first read When We Lost Our Heads, and this is kind of a fantastic dark historical fiction novel with very morally great characters. So it follows 2 friends and we kind of follow them throughout several years of their lives. They're very kind of strange, weird girls, and we follow them when they become childhood friends and where they eventually have a falling out. When we follow them after several years after that, where they kind of come back together again. I think this is a plot, I'm not doing a good job describing it, but I think this is a book that is best kind of going into it, not really knowing too much, but it takes place in kind of the mid to late 1800s in Montreal, hence why I read it in January. And this one was really interesting. I think it is like this book is not for everyone, I will say that, but it had a really fantastic ending. So the payoff that you get at the end, especially like what is unraveled for the last, I would say like 20-30 pages, was really great. But again, I don't think this is a book that is for everyone. Again, with the very morally great characters, it's very hard to really, like these characters and like the choices that they make, but I was still invested in the plot enough to really, enjoy it. I gave this like a 3.5, like 3 stars. Like I think it dealt with very interesting subject matter. I'm looking at my notes right here, but I says it deals with like gender equality, gender identity, sexuality, and class. So there's a lot of other kind of themes that are interwoven in within this storyline. And again, I don't think it's one for everyone, but I really liked the topics that it brought. I really liked the ending especially. And again, I'm not doing a really great job of describing this book just because I think it's best to kind of go in not really knowing too much, and I feel like that's the only thing you really need to know. But again, this book might not be for everyone, but if you really like morally great characters and like a really good payoff at the end, I think you would really like this book. Next up, I ended up kind of reading these kind of back to back. So I first read The Book of Dust by Pullman, and then I also read the sequel to it, which is The Secret Commonwealth. And these are kind of like take place after the events of His Dark Materials trilogy. The first book, The Book of Dust, takes place when Lyra is a baby, and this one takes place when Lyra is in her kind of early 20s. And so I really liked this. The first book I thought was okay. Like I thought it was a good expansion of the original trilogy where we're kind of given information of things that we kind of already know about the world that Lyra lives in at that point in time and some of the characters. But you can really tell that that book was really just, you guys are sliding, sorry, I didn't bring any of my filming equipment, so you're propped up against a vase right now. But you could tell like the first book was really setting up the scene for this one, and this does a really good job at kind of expanding on the story, and I don't want to spoil really anything about this one in particular, but kind of what I liked about both of these books, I really liked, again, I didn't really feel like The Book of Dust was that added anything new. I just thought it was a good expansion, but you can see how it was very foundational in laying out some of the characters, some of the unease that play a bigger role in this one in particular. And I just love the ending of this one. This book has been out for a while now, and they haven't announced the 3rd one, so I hope it comes out soon. I'm trying to look when this was published. Yeah, 2019. So it has been a while since this one has been out, and there's been no news yet about the 3rd trilogy or the 3rd book in this trilogy. But I think if you really like His Dark Materials, I think this is a really good expansion. But like I said, the first book, it doesn't really add much, but it's really necessary for this book. So I do think it is necessary to read The Book of Dust because there's characters that were introduced to then that we don't know in the original trilogy but play a big role in here. And I really liked it. I thought it was a really good expansion. I like how this has become a little bit more adult because now Lyra is in her early 20s. I think like the audience again is kind of geared towards a more mature audience, which I did enjoy. I think the author does a really good job. This is something I really felt too with his Dark Materials, was that he does a really good job at writing unease and feeling like something is off, and like that unease and kind of being scared as a character really projects well into me. Like I feel that unease that these characters are experiencing, and yeah, I just really enjoyed it. And that ending on this one in particular, like I like, that's why I was like, because my fiance has read this one too. He really enjoyed it, and he read it a lot like later on than me, or like earlier than me, so like he's been without the third book for a while, so hopefully we'll hear something new about this one. But again, I gave them both 4 to 5 stars. I really enjoyed them, and I just can't wait for the final book to come out. And lastly, kind of just moving on to books that I plan on reading in February. I'm kind of back into my reading routine. Just especially I find like this was kind of true with my summer reading slump, is that if I'm traveling a lot and I'm just tired, I don't really gravitate towards reading a book. If I have like a little bit of energy left in my battery, I will spend that like preferably watching TV or relaxing that way. So I feel like I'm kind of back on track. I have like a good routine now that I'm here, and I will be staying put until March basically. So there won't be any traveling on my end. But yeah, I brought all my chonker books, like the big thick books that I've just been putting off here, because I was like, well, we're not really too exciting, and I'll have these books to read at my disposal. So first up, I have House of Flame and Shadow by J.M Maas. This book came out yesterday, and I am so excited. I already started reading it. I'm about 100 pages in, and I really love it. Like I know this, like the J.M Maas books are my guilty pleasure. I know they're not, you know, exceptionally well written. I know there's things that make me kind of roll my eyes with, you know, the alpha maleness and the mates and like that stuff, and how everyone always ends up in a couple. Like there's things that drive me nuts, but this is like my guilty pleasure read, and I just am a sucker for it. So I'm just kind of making my way through this book in particular. And then there is another new release that comes out in February, and I'm not sure if I'm going to be reading it this month or not, but I was thinking, because I have to go to Chicago for a week for a conference, I'm like, that book I think is going to be smaller than all my chonker books, so that might be my Chicago read. So I haven't decided yet if I'll pick it up in February or in March, but it is The Women by Kristin. This is her newest book that comes out a week, the second week of February, and I believe it follows women who during the Vietnam War in particular. With Kristin, like for authors that I really enjoy, you guys are sliding down again, but for authors that I really enjoy, I just kind of like to like dive into their books without really knowing the synopsis. So this is how I am with Kristin, and I'm sure once I review the book, I'll give a more in-depth summary about what this book is about. But for the most part, I just want to kind of dive right in, not really know too much. I just know it takes place in Vietnam. But yeah, I'm excited. This may be my Chicago book, TBD. So here are the chonkers that I brought with me, and I brought one more book with me, but I think I will end up reading that one in March. But these are the chonkers that I hope to get to this month. In addition to like the House of Flame and Shadow, which is like over 800 pages, these are all very chonky. So I was like, you know what? It's a cold winter up here in Montreal, and I will have the books to keep me entertained, because sometimes it's a little too scary to go outside, especially because like a couple of days ago, it was like an ice storm and everything was on ice, and I'm like, I will work from home today. So sometimes it's just nice to be cozy up in the house with a book. So these are the 3 that I would like to get to this month. First up, we have Jonathan Strange and Miss Norrell by Susanna Clarke. I really love Piranesi by this author, and this is one, again, I've been putting off just because it honestly is very, very heavy. It is a chonker of a book, and there's also like, I believe there's like footnotes and stuff intertwined within this book. But it says, in the midst of the Napoleonic Wars in 1806, most people believe magic to have long since disappeared from England, until the reclusive Mr. Norrell reveals his powers and becomes an overnight celebrity. Yet the cautious, fussy Norrell is challenged by the emergence of another magician, the brilliant novice Jonathan Strange. Young, handsome, and daring, Strange is the very opposite of Norrell. He becomes Norrell's student, and they join forces in the war against France. But Strange is increasingly drawn to the wildest, most perilous forms of magic, straining his partnership with Norrell and putting at risk everything else he holds dear. So again, this is one I thought just would be fun to read on a cold winter's night, and it kind of gives that kind of historical fantasy vibe that I've been really liking so far. So this one is one that I want to read. And then this is another one that has been on my shelf for quite a while. I even have the receipt from when I bought this, and it was, so I bought this March 31st, 2022. So I think it's been almost on my shelf for 2 years, and it's time I got to it. My fiance has read this entire trilogy and he really likes it, so I'm always down to starting a new series, and this one just seems, again, very intriguing, kind of with that historical fantasy vibe. But it says, Ren is a con artist who has come to the sparkling city of Nazira with one goal, to trick her way into a noble house, securing her fortune and her sister's future. But her masquerade is just one of many, and a corrupt nightmare magic begins to weave its way through the city of dreams, the poisonous feuds of the nobility and the shadowy dangers of the impoverished underbelly become tangled, with Ren at the heart of it. So I think this one, I've heard like it's a little bit confusing in terms of the magic system and how it is being described, but my fiance said like the payoff is really good. So this is just another like fantasy series that I think would be fun to start, especially when my goal in 2024 is really to finish all the books on my shelf. This could be a series that once my book buying ban is done in 2014, I can get the rest of the books in the trilogy and read them. So that is my plan. So this is hopefully to kickstart a new series that I can enjoy and kind of marathon next year. And lastly, I feel like this is just, again, another historical fantasy. I've just really kind of been gravitating towards those recently, and it is Ordinary Monsters by J.M Rio. I'm a little bit worried about this one because I've heard people say like the premise is really good, but the execution could have been better. So I'm a little bit worried, but nevertheless, I thought I'd give it a try. But it says, England, 1882. In Victorian London, 2 children with mysterious powers are hunted by a figure of darkness, a man made of smoke. 16-year-old Charlie, despite a brutal childhood in Mississippi, doesn't have a scar on him. His body heals itself whether he wants it to or not. Marlowe, a foundling from a railway freight car, shines with a strange bluish light. He can melt or mend flesh. When a jaded female detective is recruited to escort them to safety, all 3 begin a journey into the nature of difference and belonging in the shadowy edges of the monstrous. What follows is a story of wonder and betrayal, from the gaslit streets of London and the wooden theaters of Tokyo to the eerie estate outside Edinburgh, where other children with gifts and talents have been gathered. There, the world of the dead and the world of the living collide. I just think this sounds really interesting, and especially because I've been to London, Edinburgh, and Tokyo, it'll be fun to kind of visit these areas in a different time period, obviously, to kind of travel to the 1800s in these cities. So I'm very excited, but again, I'm very and dedicated to the big books in the beginning part of the year because I feel like they're the most daunting. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll definitely be filming some more reading vlogs this month too, so keep your eyes peeled for that. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know in the comments below what books you plan on reading this month and all of that fun stuff. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye guys.